My husband just called me Barren in front of the Foundation's internal ethics panel, a room full of executives, counsel, and the HR officers who suddenly knew more about my body than I'd ever wanted to share. My name is Mara, and I'm 33 years old. My husband, Conrad, sat there in his tailored navy suit, the one he wore to board meetings and charity galas. His face was perfectly arranged into an expression of dignified suffering, the kind that said he tried everything, given his all, but some things were simply beyond his control, like his wife's defective reproductive system. His outside counsel was already shuffling papers, medical consultations, fertility clinic appointments, documentation of every failed attempt to give Conrad the family he deserved. They were trying to fold my supposed infertility and those clinic receipts into the Foundation's executive benefits story, sympathy, and a rationale for reimbursements and insurance edits that had flagged in our systems. The narrative was seamless. I was the broken component in an otherwise perfect marriage. Panel Chair Morrison listened with that careful neutrality senior adjudicators cultivate, but I could see sympathy flickering at the edges. The room was silent except for the soft tapping of the transcriptionist's keyboard. I could feel eyes on me, assessing, judging. Then I reached into my bag. The manila folder felt heavier than it should have, months of quiet investigation, compressed into 4 documents that mattered. I stood up before Conrad's counsel could finish his prepared statement. Chair Morrison, I said. My voice came out steady. I'd like to present evidence that contradicts my husband's claims. The chair looked up. Conrad's expression flickered. Confusion, then calculation. Step forward, she said. I walked to the panel dais. My heels made soft clicks against the marble floor. Each step felt like crossing a threshold I'd never be able to uncross. I handed the folder to Chair Morrison. Her expression didn't change as she reviewed the first page, or the second, but by the third, her jaw tightened. Mr. Hale, she said, would you care to explain why your name appears on a beneficiary list and an insurance portal edit log for a child named Max Grant? Conrad's counsel stood quickly. Chair, we haven't had the opportunity. Irregular? The chair said, her tone turning cold. What's irregular is a man claiming his wife is infertile, while he's been supporting a child for 9 years. Chair, if I may. You may not. Chair Morrison cut him off. Mrs. Hale, what exactly am I looking at? Foundation insurance records, I said. My husband added a dependent to his coverage in 2015. A boy named Max Grant. The edit logs show he accessed these accounts from his work computer 47 times in the past year. There are also photographs, birthday parties, school events, family dinners. Conrad had gone completely still. His name is Max, I said, looking directly at my husband. He's 9 years old, and he's Conrad's son from his first marriage. Mr. Hale, are you currently legally married to someone other than Mrs. Hale? The chair asked. No, Conrad said quickly. Too quickly. I'm divorced from Rachel Grant. The boy is mine, but the marriage is over. Then why did you tell your current wife that you wanted children, while actively parenting a child you kept hidden from her? Conrad's counsel was frantically whispering, but Conrad wasn't listening. He was staring at me, with raw hatred mixed with something that looked almost like respect. How long have you known about this child, Mrs. Hale? The chair asked. 4 months, I said. And you chose to present this evidence today, rather than through proper channels in advance? She asked. I chose to present it when my husband's counsel claimed I was the reason our marriage failed due to infertility, I said. That seemed like the appropriate moment. A flicker of something crossed Chair Morrison's face. Not quite a smile, but close. Recess granted, she said. But Mr. Hale, I strongly suggest you consider telling the truth for once. The session was adjourned. That was 3 hours ago. Now I'm sitting in a conference room with the Foundation's HR director, waiting for Conrad to decide whether he'll accept disciplinary action and a negotiated exit, or push this into a full external investigation. But let me back up. Let me show you how I ended up married to a man who hid an entire child while calling me Barren. Because this story doesn't start in a panel room. It starts 2 years earlier, in a hospital cafeteria, with a man who seemed too good to be true. Turns out, he was. The fluorescent lights in Harper Medical Foundation's cafeteria made everything look slightly unreal. I was finishing a compliance audit report when Conrad Hale sat down across from me without asking. You're Mara Keaton, he said, not a question. A statement delivered with the confidence of someone used to being right. I looked up from my laptop. He was early 40s, with careful grooming and dark hair, going silver at the temples, expensive watch, no wedding ring. I am, I said. And you are? Conrad Hale, financial consultant. I've been working with your foundation's investment portfolio, he said. He smiled. I've seen you around, always working through lunch, always alone. I thought you might appreciate some company. Here's what I should have said. I'm fine, thank you. Here's what I actually said. As long as you don't mind watching me eat leftover pad thai and review expense reports. He laughed. I've seen worse first dates. This is a first date? I asked. If you want it to be, he said. Looking back, I can see how calculated that moment was. Conrad didn't accidentally sit at my table. He'd been watching me, learning my patterns. But in that moment, all I saw was an attractive man, showing interest after 2 years of dedicating myself entirely to work. I'd moved to New Jersey for the Harper Medical Foundation job, ethics auditor for one of the largest charitable medical organizations on the East Coast. Conrad became a fixture in my routine. Lunch turned into coffee breaks. Coffee breaks turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekends exploring Manhattan like tourists. Tell me something true, Conrad said one evening in his Tribeca apartment. He was cooking, moving around his kitchen with easy confidence. Something true? I said. Something you don't tell everyone. Something real, he said, sliding a pan off the heat. I took a sip of wine. I became an ethics auditor because I hate liars, I said. My father ran financial scams when I was growing up. He destroyed people's savings, their retirement funds. Conrad's expression shifted. He turned from the stove. Mara, I'm sorry, he said quietly. I watched him lie to everyone, including my mother, right up until the FBI arrested him, I said. I decided I never wanted to be the person getting fooled. What happened to your mother? He asked, softer now. She stayed loyal to him, even after everything. Visited him in prison every month until she died, I said. That must have been hard to watch, he said. It taught me that love without honesty is just another kind of prison, I said. I looked up at him. So that's my truth. I need honesty more than I need romance or security. And if I can't give you that? He asked. Then tell me now, I said. He crossed the room, pulled me close. You're safe with me, he whispered. I promise you that. No lies, no games, just us. The irony would be almost funny if it didn't still hurt. We got married 6 months after that cafeteria meeting. Small ceremony, just a few friends and colleagues. Conrad said he didn't have much family, and I'd been estranged from mine since my father's sentencing. The prenuptial agreement came up about a month before the wedding. I need to ask you something, he said, almost apologetic. And I need you not to be offended. That's a concerning way to start a conversation, I said. I want us to sign a prenup, he said. Okay. Why? I asked. I've been through a divorce before. It was messy. I just want us to protect ourselves if things ever go wrong, he said carefully. You were married before? You never mentioned an ex-wife, I said. It was a long time ago, years before we met, he said. How long were you married? I asked. Does it matter? He said, his voice gaining an edge. It's over. Has been for a decade. I'd rather focus on our future. I'm not asking to dissect your previous relationship. I just want to understand, I said. He was quiet. We got married young. It didn't work. We wanted different things, he said, looking away. I don't like talking about it because it was a failure. And I don't like failing. A prenup seems reasonable. What are you thinking? I said. Standard terms, fair division of assets, clauses about infidelity, abandonment, he said. All right. I'll have my lawyer review it, I said. You don't trust me? He asked, hurt edging in. I trust you, but my mother trusted my father and that destroyed her. It's not personal, Conrad. It's just smart, I said. He smiled, kissed my forehead. I love that about you, that practical streak, he said. I signed the prenup because the terms seemed fair and because I trusted Conrad, because I thought we were building something permanent. Our first year of marriage was almost peaceful. I worked long hours investigating grant misuse. Conrad consulted on investment strategies, traveling occasionally. We met for dinner most evenings, made love with a comfortable frequency of couples who still liked each other. But there were moments, small things that didn't quite fit. Conrad's phone was always face down, always password protected. He'd check it constantly, then dismiss my curiosity with vague explanations, saying it was just work. He traveled more than seemed necessary. Weekend trips to Boston and Philadelphia, overnight stays in Connecticut. I mentioned it once, and his response was immediate and defensive. This is how I support us, he said, sharp now. Or would you prefer I stop earning money, so I can stay home and watch TV with you? I didn't bring it up again. We talked about children early in our marriage. Conrad seemed enthusiastic. I'd love to be a father, he said, but let's wait a bit. Get settled first. Maybe take that trip to Europe we've been planning. Reasonable. Logical. Except the waiting kept extending. Europe became next year. Next year became when things calmed down at work. When things calmed down became maybe we should wait until you get that promotion. The promotion came. I became senior ethics auditor, leading investigations instead of assisting them. Conrad took me to dinner to celebrate, ordered expensive wine, made all the right proud husband noises. But when I mentioned maybe it was time to start trying for a baby, he changed the subject so smoothly I almost didn't notice. Sometimes I wondered if he wanted me to believe something was wrong with me, like he was planting that idea early. Speaking of your promotion, he said, refilling my wine glass, there's a fundraising gala next month. Harper's biggest donors will be there. You should come with me. The gala was exactly what I expected. Harper Medical Foundation transformed its main hall into something out of a magazine. Conrad looked perfect in his tuxedo. He always looked perfect at these events. Miranda Voss found us within 15 minutes, the foundation's CFO, sharp-featured and sharper-minded, wearing a black gown that probably cost more than my first car. Mara, you look lovely, she said smoothly. Conrad, there's someone I need you to meet. Potential investor. I watched them walk away together. Miranda leaned in close to whisper something. Conrad laughed, then glanced back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. During a quiet moment, I pulled up the foundation's quarterly report. Investment returns up 30%, grant disbursements down 12%. In the car afterward, Conrad was unusually talkative. You've been quiet lately, he said as we pulled into our building's garage. I've been thinking about when we're going to start trying for a baby, I said. We've talked about this, he said. We talk around it, I said. The timing isn't right, he said. When will it be right? I asked. I don't know. Next year maybe, he said. You said that last year, I reminded him. Why are you pushing this? He asked, voice tightening. Because I'm 33 years old and I want a family, I said. And I want to be financially secure first, he said sharply. We are financially secure. What are we waiting for? I asked. For me to be ready, he said flatly. That's not an answer, I said quietly. It's the only answer I have, he said, his tone final. He cut the engine and walked toward the elevator, leaving me sitting in the passenger seat. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed and a note: early meeting in Philadelphia. Back tonight? Sorry, we'll talk. We didn't talk. This became the pattern: early departures, late returns, conversations that circled around anything meaningful. My friend Daphne noticed the change. We met for lunch at our usual spot. Okay, what's wrong? She asked. Nothing's wrong, I said. Mara, I've known you since grad school, she said, leaning in. Conrad and I are going through a rough patch. It's normal, I said. What kind of rough patch? She asked. He doesn't want children. Or he does, but not now. Or maybe not ever, I said, picking at my salad. Daphne set down her fork. She worked as an insurance fraud auditor and had the same instinct I did for patterns that didn't fit. How often is he traveling? She asked. 2-3 times a week. Sometimes more, I said. You have access to foundation systems, right? Insurance portal, expense reports? She asked. Of course. Why? I said, frowning. Check the version history. Edit logs. See who's accessing what and when, she said. You're an auditor, Mara. Audit him. That feels like a violation, I said. So does lying to your wife, she said. Just be careful. And if you need someone discreet, I know people. That evening, Conrad came home at a reasonable hour with flowers and Thai takeout. I've been an ass, he said, setting the bag on the counter. I'm sorry. Work has been intense. Conrad, are we okay? I asked. Of course we are. Why would you ask that? He said lightly. Because you barely touch me anymore. Because you're never home, I said. He pulled back, frowning. You're imagining things, he said. I love you. I'm just under pressure. It'll pass. But it didn't pass. Over the next few months, the distance grew wider. More travel. More late meetings. More phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I started paying attention to the foundation's financial reports with the same scrutiny I applied to grant audits. Something was wrong. When I mentioned it to Conrad, he dismissed my concerns. You're seeing problems that don't exist, he said. Maybe that's the real issue. Maybe you need to figure out why you're so suspicious. The comment stung because it hit close to home. My father's betrayal had left scars, but this felt different. This wasn't paranoia. This was pattern recognition. I just didn't know what pattern I was seeing yet. That would come later, when a woman named Rachel Grant walked into my office with a photograph of a little boy who had Conrad's eyes. Even when I loved him, he was already living a double life. Rachel Grant looked nothing like I'd imagined. Petite, with dark hair and a practical ponytail, wire-rimmed glasses. She looked like someone who taught kindergarten, not like someone who'd been erased from her own marriage. "I'm sorry to just show up," she said, her voice polite but strained, "but I didn't think this was a conversation we should have over the phone." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "How did you find me?" I asked. "LinkedIn," she said. "Your profile says you work here." She placed a manila envelope on my desk. "I'm not here to cause problems," she said softly. "I just thought you should know the truth." She opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. The boy was maybe 9 years old, with Conrad's jawline and his exact shade of gray-green eyes. He was smiling, holding a soccer trophy. "This is Max, Conrad's son." "Our son," she said. I took the photograph. The resemblance was undeniable. "When did you get divorced?" I asked. "That's the thing," she said. "I thought we were divorced. Conrad filed papers 10 years ago. I signed everything. But last month, updating my insurance information for Max's school, I discovered something strange." She pulled out insurance beneficiary forms. Conrad's name as primary policyholder, Max listed as dependent. "He never removed me from his emergency contacts," she continued. "When I called the insurance company, they told me I was still listed as his spouse in their system. Not ex-spouse. Spouse." My mouth felt dry. "That's probably just a clerical error," I said, even as doubt pooled in my throat. "That's what I thought," she said. "So I requested our divorce decree. The paperwork was never properly filed. Conrad submitted everything but never followed through with the final signatures. Technically, legally, we're still married." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of my desk. "I don't understand. Why would he do that?" I asked. "I've been asking myself that for weeks," she said quietly. "The only answer I can come up with is that Conrad wanted legal protection if something went wrong with his finances. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to finish what he started." "Does he see Max?" I asked. "Every other weekend," she said. "Birthday parties, school events. He's not a terrible father, just an absent one." She leaned forward. "Mara, I didn't come here to destroy your marriage. I came because I found out Conrad got remarried to you, which means he possibly committed bigamy." The word hung in the air between us. "When did you find out about me?" I asked quietly. 2 weeks ago," she said. "Max mentioned his dad had a new wife. Then I checked the insurance portal and saw your name listed as a beneficiary. That's when I realized what he'd done." "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. Before you make any legal decisions, before he convinces you that you're the problem." Something in her tone made me look up sharply. "Did he do that to you?" I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "For 3 years, I thought our marriage failed because I wasn't exciting enough, not ambitious enough," she said. "Conrad had this way of making me feel like I was constantly disappointing him just by existing." I knew exactly what she meant, the subtle dismissals, the gentle corrections. Then one day, I realized I spent more time managing his moods than living my own life, she said. "So I asked for a divorce." He agreed immediately, almost too easily. I thought about all the weekends Conrad had traveled. How many of those trips had been about seeing his son? "Do you believe me?" Rachel asked softly. I nodded. Everything she'd said aligned with patterns I'd been ignoring for months. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "But thank you for telling me." After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the photograph of Max, this child who'd been living parallel to my marriage. My phone buzzed. Text from Conrad. "Dinner tonight? I'll cook. We need to talk." I typed back, "Sounds good. See you at 7. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the Foundation's internal database. If Conrad was living a double life in his personal relationships, what else was he hiding? The Foundation's database held secrets the way churches hold confession, everything recorded in neat digital rows, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. I began with Conrad's expense reports from the past 2 years. At first glance, everything looked legitimate. Conrad was meticulous about documentation. That should have been my first clue. I cross-checked his travel dates with the Foundation's calendar. 3 trips to Philadelphia that coincided with board meetings he hadn't attended, and 4 trips to Boston during weeks when the Foundation had no active business there. Then I looked at his call logs, dozens of calls to a number I didn't recognize. A reverse lookup revealed it belonged to an elementary school in Westchester. Max's school. Conrad had been using foundation resources to maintain his secret family, charging personal travel to donor accounts, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference disguised as business expenses. Then I found something worse: the transfer of $47,000 to a vendor I didn't recognize. The authorization signature was mine, but I had never approved that transfer. The timestamp said 1047 p.m. on a Tuesday 3 months earlier. That Tuesday I'd been home with food poisoning, nowhere near a computer. Someone had used my credentials. 2 more transfers surfaced, $32,000 and $55,000, both under my authorization, both on days I hadn't been in the office. Vendors that existed only on paper, with no physical addresses. Shell companies. Conrad was siphoning donor funds through shells and using my credentials to do it. If anyone audited those transfers, the trail would point to me first, the senior ethics auditor, and I would appear either complicit or grossly incompetent. Either way, I'd be the one on the hook. I took screenshots of everything and uploaded them to a secure cloud account Conrad didn't know existed. That night, when I got home, Conrad had made chicken piccata. "You look exhausted," he said, kissing my forehead. "Just a lot of grant reviews," I told him. "Nothing exciting." We ate dinner. He talked about a potential investor while I nodded, thinking about the transfers and how completely he had set me up to take the blame. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "Just tired." He studied me for a moment, then added gently, "We haven't really talked since the baby conversation. There's not much to talk about." "Mara," he said, taking my hand, "I know I've been distant. The truth is, I'm scared of failing again, of disappointing you. You're all I have left. You're the only real thing in my life." I thought about Max, about the 9 years of secret parenting he'd managed while claiming fatherhood terrified him. "Conrad," I asked quietly, "are you happy in this marriage?" "Of course." "Why would you ask that?" "Because you don't act like someone who's happy. You act like someone running away from something." His expression hardened. "You're the one who's been pulling away," he said. "Maybe you should figure out why you're so determined to see problems where none exist." There it was again, the gaslighting, the practiced deflection. "You're probably right," I said, forcing a small smile. "I'm just stressed about work." Later, in the bathroom, I turned on the water for cover and opened the voice memo app on my phone. Then I went back to the kitchen. "Conrad? Can I ask you something?" He glanced up from his plate. "Of course. Do you ever think about your ex-wife?" He froze. "Why would you ask that?" "Just curious. I don't even know her name." "Rachel," he said after a pause. "Her name was Rachel. And no, I don't think about her." "Do you have any kids?" "No." "Why?" "Just wondering. You said you were scared of being a father." "The reason," he said carefully, "is that it's a massive responsibility. I've seen enough of my friends struggle with parenting to know it's not something to take lightly." "You're right," I said softly. "Sorry for bringing it up." Back in the bathroom, I stopped the recording and saved it with a date stamp Conrad's own voice, clearly stating he had no children. Proof of deliberate deception. That night, I lay in bed listening to his breathing slow into sleep, thinking about those financial transfers, about Max's photograph, about Rachel's calm face across my desk. I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was building a case, and when I was ready, I was going to burn down everything Conrad had built on lies. The next morning, I went to the office early. My desk had become mission control. Spreadsheets, screenshots, voice recordings, photographs, everything organized in encrypted folders. Daphne called at 9. "Coffee? You sound like you need it." At the cafe, she took one look at my face and ordered a double espresso. "You found something," she said. "He has a 9-year-old son from a previous marriage. He never finalized divorcing, and he's been stealing from the foundation using my credentials." I told her everything. The insurance records, the expense reports, the fraudulent transfers bearing my authorization signature. "You need to be careful," Daphne warned. "If those transfers have your signature, you're implicated." "I know. Does he know you know?" "Not yet." "What's your plan?" "Gather everything, build an airtight case, then decide whether to go to the police or the foundation's board." The board was meeting in 3 weeks. That gave me exactly 21 days to finish gathering evidence. That afternoon, I found Conrad's hiring file in the foundation's archive room. His previous employer listed on the resume was different from the one on his W-2. I ran both company names through a business registry. The company on the resume existed, the one on the W-2 did not. Conrad had been hiding income long before he joined the foundation. Around 8 that evening, footsteps sounded in the hallway. When I looked up, Miranda Voss was standing in my doorway. Working late? She asked. Grant reviews. You? Budget projections. How's Conrad? I haven't seen him much lately. Something in her tone made me cautious. He's fine, I said, busy with client meetings. He mentioned you two were having some personal issues. I set down my pen. He told you we were having issues? Just in passing? He seemed stressed. Marriage is hard, especially when both people have demanding careers. I pictured Conrad sitting across from her, sharing intimate details of our marriage, painting me as the difficult one. After she left, I pulled up her employment file. She had started at the foundation the same year as Conrad. I cross-referenced her expense reports with his. They traveled together often, always separate hotel rooms, always separate claims, yet always the same dates, the same cities. I checked the foundation's conference attendance records. Half those events weren't even relevant to their departments. They'd been traveling together for years, maintaining the appearance of propriety while covering something else entirely. Conrad wasn't just stealing from the foundation. He was doing it with Miranda's help, the CFO with access to every financial system, paired with a consultant who could justify any expense. My phone rang. Conrad, just wanted to say good night, he said. I'm still at dinner, probably another hour. Take your time, I told him. Mara, I love you. I know things have been hard lately, but I love you. I looked at the files spread across my desk. I love you too, I said quietly. After he hung up, I stood at the window. My office overlooked the foundation's main courtyard. The fountain, the mission statement carved in stone, dedicated to improving lives through compassionate care and ethical stewardship. The words felt like mockery. In the glass, my reflection stared back, tired but resolute. Conrad thought he'd married someone he could control, someone who would take the fall for his crimes. Because she wouldn't see them coming, he'd miscalculated badly. I wasn't the trusting woman he'd met 2 years ago. I wasn't my mother, staying loyal to a liar until death. I was the daughter of a con man who'd learned to recognize deceit, an ethics auditor who understood exactly how fraud worked, and the war he didn't even know we were fighting. I had already won it. The more I smiled, the more Conrad watched me, like he was waiting for me to break. 2 weeks remained until the board meeting. Each day had become a performance. I played the loving wife, who hadn't yet discovered that her marriage was built entirely on fraud. Conrad noticed the difference. Whenever he caught me smiling at something on my phone, his expression shifted. Suspicious, calculating. You seem happier lately, he said one morning. I am. I think I was letting stress get to me, obsessing over things I can't control. That's good, he replied. I've been worried about you. At work, Miranda grew unusually attentive, stopping by my office with coffee, asking about my weekend plans. Have you had a chance to review the quarterly financial statements yet? She asked one afternoon. I'm presenting them at the board meeting. There it was. She wanted to know what I'd seen. I haven't gotten to those yet, I told her lightly, but I'll take a look this week. After she left, I checked the database access logs. Miranda's name appeared again and again: late night sessions, weekend logins, edits to vendor files and transaction histories. She was cleaning up, covering tracks. I took screenshots and added them to my growing evidence file. I could have gone to the police, let the justice system handle it, clean and professional. Or I could wait for the board meeting and expose both Conrad and Miranda publicly, where everyone would hear the truth at once. After months of being gaslit and positioned to take the fall, I wanted more than Conrad's arrest. I wanted his humiliation. That evening he came home with roses. No occasion, he said, smiling. Just wanted to do something nice. We cooked dinner together and, for a moment, looked like the perfect couple in a lifestyle magazine. Attractive, successful, happy. All of it was performance. Later that night, I opened the database again. Miranda had logged in just 3 hours earlier. She had modified multiple records, changed authorization timestamps, altered vendor approval dates. She was backdating evidence, rewriting history to make the fraudulent transfers look properly reviewed. She was making sure that when the audit came, every path would lead to me, either as a conspirator or a fool. They had been planning this for months: the marriage, the setup, the careful documentation that would make me the perfect scapegoat. Conrad hadn't married me out of love. He'd married me because I was useful. I exported the entire database and backed it up to 3 encrypted drives. Then I sent delayed delivery emails to my private account, each containing copies of the files. If anything happened to me, if they tried to delete the data, the truth would still exist. I wasn't just building a case anymore. I was building insurance. 1 week before the board meeting, I met Daphne at a different cafe. You look terrible, She said, "Thanks. I feel worse." I told her about Miranda's late-night edits to the database, and about my decision to wait for the board meeting instead of going to the police. "That's risky," she said. "They're already discrediting me," I told her. "Conrad's been telling people I'm unstable. If I went to the police, it would take months. By then, he'd have convinced everyone I was either incompetent or vindictive. And the board meeting? It's immediate, public, undeniable. I want everyone to see who he really is while the evidence is still fresh. What if it backfires? Then I'm unemployed, and possibly criminally liable for fraud I didn't commit. But at least I'll know I tried." That night, I went through my phone and started deleting photos, pictures of Conrad and me at restaurants, on vacations, at foundation events. All those carefully curated images that were supposed to prove we were happy. Each deletion felt like reclaiming space, like erasing a version of myself I didn't want to be anymore. When my phone was finally empty of us, I felt lighter. Ready. Conrad came home around 9. His voice sounded tight when he asked, "Can we talk?" "What's wrong?" I asked. He sat across from me, eyes scanning my face. "I got a strange email from Foundation IT. They're running a security audit, checking for unauthorized access." I kept my expression neutral. "That sounds standard. I'm worried they might find something irregular in my expense reports. Questions about documentation. Are you worried I'm going to find something?" "No, of course not. I just don't want any misunderstandings. If your expense reports are accurate," I said evenly, "you have nothing to worry about." For a moment, his face softened into that practiced vulnerability I'd come to recognize. "You're right," he said. "I'm probably just paranoid." Then, after a pause, his voice dropped. "Can I ask you something? Do you still love me?" The question was a trap. He needed to know where I stood. I looked at our joined hands. "I love the person I thought you were," I said quietly. "I'm not sure that person actually exists." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm tired of feeling like I'm married to a stranger. It means I want honesty more than comfort." His expression shifted. Cold, sharp, calculated. "You want a divorce. I want truth. If divorce is the only way to get it, then yes. After everything I've done for you?" I met his gaze. "What have you given me, Conrad? A nice apartment? Expensive dinners? Those are things, not trust, not honesty. So you're just going to throw away our marriage?" "I'm ending this conversation because you're not listening," I said, standing up. "When you're ready to have a real conversation, we can talk." I walked to the bedroom and closed the door behind me. Then I leaned against it and listened. His footsteps paced the floor. His voice dropped low as he made a phone call, quiet, urgent, deliberate. I knew he was calling Miranda. My phone was recording everything. Voice activated, capturing every word. 20 minutes later, the front door closed. Conrad was gone. Meeting Miranda, figuring out what to do about their problem being me. I checked my backup drives one more time. Everything was there. Secure. Multiple copies in multiple locations. 7 days until the board meeting. And I was ready. The morning of the board meeting, I woke before my alarm. Dawn light filtered through the windows. Conrad was already gone. I took my time getting ready. Navy suit, white blouse, pearl earrings my grandmother had given me. Professional. Composed. In my bag were 3 USB drives containing the complete database export, transaction records, and access logs. On my phone, the voice recordings to be reviewed in executive session. In my briefcase, printed copies of everything, organized with index tabs. The Foundation's boardroom was on the top floor, all glass walls and expensive furniture. The members were already gathering. 12 people in total. Doctors, lawyers, executives, people who had donated millions and wanted to believe in ethical stewardship. Miranda stood at the head of the table, arranging her presentation. When she saw me walk in, she smiled. "Mara, glad you could make it. I thought it might be educational," I said. Conrad arrived 5 minutes late. When he saw me sitting at the table, something flickered across his face. Surprise, then concern. "Dr. Harrison, the board chair, called the meeting to order. Miranda, your first quarterly financial review." She began her presentation. Sleek slides filled the screen, all charts and graphs. "As you can see, we've maintained excellent fiscal responsibility. Grant disbursements have been strategically optimized to maximize impact." Strategically optimized. An interesting way to describe embezzlement. "Any questions?" Dr. Harrison asked. I raised my hand. "Mara?" He said, "You have a question?" "An observation, actually." I stood. "I've been reviewing vendor payment records, and I found irregularities the board should be aware of." Miranda's smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. Transaction authorizations that don't align with protocol. Vendor files with incomplete documentation. Shell companies receiving foundation funds. I pulled out a printed spreadsheet. This is a summary of 47 questionable transactions, amounts, dates, vendors, and approval paths totaling approximately $1.3 million. The room went silent. Board members leaned forward, reading. Mara, Miranda said carefully, this is highly inappropriate. You should have brought these concerns to me privately. I tried, I said. That was 6 weeks ago. Nothing changed, except more records were altered to cover the trail. That's an extremely serious accusation, Dr. Harrison said. Do you have evidence? I do. I placed the 3 USB drives on the table. Complete database export showing every transaction, authorization record, and access log. I also have documentation showing my digital credentials were used on dates when I wasn't in the office. Someone used my login to create the illusion of proper oversight. This is absurd, Conrad said, standing up. Mara has been under enormous stress. She's fixated on problems that don't exist. This is clearly some kind of breakdown. Is it? I asked. Because the benefits activity and access logs indicate an undisclosed minor dependent tied to his account, along with personal expenses routed through foundation funds. Given privacy constraints, I request that the supporting materials, HR benefits records and the recorded statement, be reviewed in executive session. For purposes of today's agenda, the transaction and system access evidence is sufficient to show policy violations. This is insane, Conrad said, but his voice cracked. She's doctored those recordings, then explained the access logs. I handed another document across the table. These system logs show 83 vendor record changes executed by the CFO account last week. Backdated approvals and altered authorization histories. Dr. Harrison turned to Miranda. Is this true? I made routine updates to ensure accuracy, she said. Standard to database maintenance. At 2 in the morning? On a Sunday? I projected a screenshot onto the boardroom screen. Here's the access log. 47 minutes of continuous modifications, all after I started asking questions. The board erupted into murmurs until Dr. Harrison raised his hand. These are extremely serious allegations. If what you're presenting is true, this constitutes fraud, embezzlement, possibly criminal conspiracy. He looked at Conrad and Miranda. Do either of you wish to respond? I want my lawyer, Miranda said finally. That's probably wise, Dr. Harrison replied. This meeting is suspended. Conrad, Miranda, please leave the room. Mara, stay. I watched Conrad stand. He looked at me one last time, eyes cold, filled with hatred and the dawning understanding that he had lost. You've destroyed everything, he said quietly. No, I told him. I exposed what you built. There's a difference. When they were gone, Dr. Harrison turned to me. You understand this will require a full investigation, possibly police involvement. I understand. And you're prepared for that? I've been prepared for weeks. The next 4 hours were a blur of documentation and explanation. Every transfer, every forged authorization, every false report. By the time I finished, the sun was setting. I felt hollowed out, but lighter. Thank you, Mara, Dr. Harrison said. I know this couldn't have been easy. He stopped being my husband the moment I discovered who he really was, I said. I walked out through the foundation's lobby and into the evening air. It was cool and clean, the kind of air that felt like possibility. My phone buzzed. A message from Daphne. How did it go? I typed back, it's over. I'll call you tomorrow. I stood on the sidewalk watching people pass by. Normal people, living normal lives, while mine had just detonated inside a boardroom. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired, and free, and uncertain what came next. The war was over. I had won. Now I had to learn how to live with what winning had cost. The sun was setting behind me, but ahead the sky was still streaked with light. Not quite dark yet. Somewhere between endings and beginnings. That's where I was standing. And for the first time in years, I was standing there alone. By choice, on my own terms. The apartment is quiet again. No lawyers calling at dawn. No board emails. No sound of Conrad's key turning in the lock. Outside, November rain streaks the windows. The city sounds muted, softened. It has been 3 months since the board meeting. The emails stopped around week 6. The lawyers didn't. I make coffee in the kitchen that is now just mine. The silence feels different than it used to. Not empty, just still. The foundation suspended operations 2 weeks after my testimony. A full forensic audit, a federal investigation, a complete restructuring from the ground up. My name was cleared around week 8. Miranda took a plea deal, 15 years. She gave up Conrad for a reduced sentence. Conrad's trial is scheduled for March. His lawyers keep filing motions and delays, trying to suppress evidence and discredit testimony. So far, none of it is working. I don't think about him much anymore, not because I've forgiven him, but because he's become a problem I already solved. Documentation complete. Evidence secured. Outcome pending, but inevitable. What I think about now is how to fill the space where anger used to live. I meet Daphne for coffee on a gray Tuesday. A different cafe, closer to my new neighborhood. I moved out of the Tribeca apartment 6 weeks ago. You look different, Daphne says. Good different or concerning different? I ask. Rested different. Like you're actually sleeping? I am. And it's true. For the first time in years, I sleep through the night. Any word on the consulting offer? She asks. An email came last week from a nonprofit oversight group in Boston. They wanted someone to build ethics frameworks, train auditors, help organizations spot fraud before it spreads. Good money, meaningful work, a real chance to start over. I'm thinking about it, I tell her. But I'm also thinking about taking some time. Figure out who I am when I'm not investigating something. For what it's worth, she says, I think you handled everything exactly right. I think about that, about the difference between justice and revenge. I thought winning would feel better, I say. Winning isn't supposed to feel good, Daphne says. It's supposed to feel final. When I get home, there's an envelope in my mailbox. Inside is a crayon drawing on construction paper, stick figures labeled me and Mom and Dad. A note in Rachel's handwriting reads, Max wanted you to have this. He doesn't fully understand what happened, but he knows his dad made mistakes. Thank you for telling the truth. It gave me the courage to file for full custody. We're doing okay. I hope you are too. I put the drawing on my refrigerator. This child I've never met, whose existence unraveled everything, suddenly feels real. Not just evidence, a person. I think about the version of myself who sat in that cafeteria 2 years ago. The woman who believed Conrad when he said he'd never lie. Who ignored red flags because she wanted the fairy tale to be real. I don't hate that version of myself anymore. She was doing her best with what she knew. But I'm not her anymore. The consulting firm wants an answer by Friday. I open their email again. Your expertise in fraud detection and ethical oversight would be invaluable. Your unique perspective, having experienced betrayal firsthand while maintaining professional integrity, makes you the ideal candidate. My unique perspective. An interesting way to describe having your life implode while you documented the explosion. But they're not wrong. I do understand fraud differently now. Not as policy violations, but as a kind of intimate violence. The way lies compound over time. The way systems collapse when people value loyalty over truth. I could teach that. Help organizations build cultures where honesty isn't optional. Or I could take 6 months, travel, read books that have nothing to do with ethics or fraud, figure out what I actually want. I close the email and save it as a draft. That evening, I walk through my new neighborhood. Brownstones, corner markets, couples walking dogs, normal people living normal lives. Nobody here knows who I am. My phone buzzes. A text from Dr. Harrison. Restructure complete. New leadership in place. We've implemented all your oversight protocols. If you're ever interested in coming back, we'd welcome you. But I understand if you're not. Either way, thank you for your courage. I don't respond immediately. I just keep walking. The rain has stopped. The air smells clean, like possibility mixed with wet pavement. I think about that morning 3 months ago. The more I smiled, the more Conrad watched me, waiting for me to break. I'm smiling now. A real smile. Nobody watching. Nobody waiting for me to perform, collapse, or prove anything. Just me standing on a sidewalk in a city learning to feel like home again. My phone in my pocket, filled with job offers and thank you notes and possibilities I haven't decided about yet. The war is over. I survived it. What comes next is up to me. I unlock my door, climb the stairs to my apartment. Small space, affordable rent, windows that face east, so I get the morning light. This place feels lived in. Mine. Real. I sit on my couch and open my laptop. I pull up that consulting offer one more time. Then I close it, open a blank document instead, and start typing. I'm Mara, and I'm 33 years old. 3 months ago, I exposed my husband's fraud and watched my entire life implode. This is what I learned about trust, evidence, and the difference between justice and revenge. Maybe I'll send it to someone. Maybe I won't. Maybe it'll just stay on my screen. Words that help me make sense of everything that happened. But for now, it's enough. The writing, the quiet, The rain starting again outside my window, the beginning of whatever comes next.